Phew, I've been walking this new path for a while now. Where the hell did I end up? Oh, shit. What is up, everyone? Welcome to the first review of Real Horror. I'm Tensa, and we're starting with my favorite horror franchise of them all, Friday the 13th. Only way to start is to go back to the original 1980 classic, directed by Sean Cunningham. Although some would argue its originality, as it was clearly inspired by slashers that preceded it, but took elements from them and cranked up the blood, gore, and sex. The simple formula helped fuel the onslaught of slasher movies that dominated horror in the 80s. But does this Halloween copycat hold up 40 years later in the subgenre it helped launch into the mainstream? Let's take a look. Things kick off at Camp Crystal Lake in 1958, where horny teens sneak off as an unknown assailant stalks a cabin of children. The mystery person finds their way to the teens and promptly disposes of them with a stab to the gut and a terrifying zoom into white. This is a fairly well done opening that lets you know exactly what you're in for, establishing the camp setting, which at this point had not really been done before, and putting you in the killer's POV a la Black Christmas. This is done to set up what is essentially a whodunit. Whether or not that's executed well throughout the film is a topic for later. The killer walking amongst the sleeping children is slightly unsettling since you don't know if they're in any sort of real peril. But then we get the deaths of the counselors and you realize this is going to be a semi-exploitation body count film. Harry Manfredini's score is the best thing about all this. We're given the infamous and a frighteningly familiar sound. Yeah, the influence is strong, but I've always felt that Manfredini was able to make it his own. Moving on, we flash to present day, 1980. Annie is in town looking for a ride to Camp Crystal Lake, or as the locals refer to it as,
"Good to Camp Blood, ain't you? God damn it, Ralph, get out of here. Go on, get!"
The townies, including Crazy Ralph, try to warn this peppy girl that no good can come from going to Crystal Lake with its bad history. Drowning in 57, murders in 58, multiple fires, and tainted water. You'd think this would drive any sane person away, right?
Wrong!
Annie is dropped off by a cemetery.
Now that is irony!
To walk the rest of the way. After that, we're introduced to the rest of the cannon fodder. I mean characters. You got Ned, Marcy, Brenda, Alice, Steve, Bill, and Kevin Bacon. Our first group of teens in this franchise isn't the greatest, but upon rewatch, I find them to be far better than later ones. You've got the comedic relief in Ned, the sexy couple in Marcy and Jack, and the weird semi-love triangle with Alice, Steve, and Bill. Steve is obviously older than the rest of them, and yet he has this weird scene with Alice that leads us to believe they got a little something-something. But she seems to get along better with Bill. Unfortunately, all of this goes absolutely nowhere, so there's no sense in harping on it. Oh, and there's Brenda, too. The cast is very likable thanks to the amount of time they share with each other, but I'll admit that ultimately they're not super memorable. Just as they're getting things together, Steve leaves to go into town for supplies, in his Jeep. We then cut to Annie still walking to camp when she's picked up by someone, in a Jeep. Not sure if this was done purposely to start building up a list of suspects. Regardless, it's revealed that whoever is driving is the killer and hunts down Annie and kills her in our first great effect. Tom Savini is responsible for the amazing makeup in this, and he's an absolute wonder as the throat slit is the first display of his talent. The best is yet to come. Back at the camp, the group gets into some shenanigans, including murdering a snake. Yes, it is a real snake, and it does bother me that they just couldn't fake it. Seems like they really only included the scene to set up Bill as a potential killer with his machete skills. Anyways, they get ready for dinner when
Messenger of God.
How long was that dude just standing in there? What if no one opened the damn door to let him out?
Hello? I'm cold and there are wolves after after me.
He leaves, but continues his "you're all doomed" ranting that no one cares to acknowledge. I think this is another attempt at establishing a red herring, but this old geezer doesn't seem capable of doing much except hiding in pantries. As night falls, the group begins to separate. Ned goes missing after spotting a dark figure in a cabin, Jack and Marcy go off to have sex, and Alice, Bill, and Brenda play strip Monopoly. Nothing too exciting until we get Ned's dead body in the bed above Marcy and Jack. Now our attention is on the top of that bunk as Jack lights up a joint post-lovin'. What kind of horror might fall on top of... Fantastic. Savini strikes again with an amazing looking kill with that arrow poking right through and the blood just spurting out. The build up to it was actually well executed. Knowing that Ned is right above him, you're expecting something to come from above, but we're shocked as the killer strikes from beneath. A perfect scene. This is then followed up with another well done kill. Marcy is all alone in the bathroom, or so she thinks. She keeps hearing noises and checking for signs of anyone else. Just as she admits that it's all in her imagination, she turns around to be met with an axe right in the face. This isn't as tense as Jack's scene, but the payoff is worth it. It is weirdly edited with that awful scream of hers, but seeing the result of an axe to skull collision is awesome. We then see that Steve has been at this rainy diner during these events, so he couldn't possibly be the killer, right? Right. Because the next thing you know, Brenda is wandering out into the rain after a child's voice is yelling for help. This is such an eerie scene. You don't know if this is the killer or has this become some sort of supernatural thing. Who could be capable of committing horrendous acts while also being able to sound like a child?
No, that's ignorant. That's ignorant.
Brenda is lured to the archery range, and unfortunately it all leads up to an off-screen death, but this won't be the last we see of her. Alice and Bill go to investigate only to find a bloody axe, no friends, cut phone lines, and a dead car battery. Nothing scary going on around here. At least Steve has made it back to the camp to help. Well, I'm sure Bill will be enough as he goes to fix the generator. I actually really like this scene because it does feel kind of tense. You keep waiting for Bill to meet his end, but you don't see him attacked or even off-screen. If you ask me, it's a well-done use of tension. The complete opposite of what follows as we are forced to watch Alice monotonously make coffee. It is a complete time waster with no sense of danger. I'm convinced it's there to solely make the full length of the feature time. She finally finishes the coffee and goes looking for Bill. She manages to find him just hanging around. Boo! And damn, he looks like he got the worst of it between having his throat slit and being impaled with multiple arrows. It makes you go back to the generator scene and wonder how the attack went down. I mean, it had to have been insanely brutal. So we're down to our final girl, Alice, and I'm not super impressed. Honestly, she doesn't make the best protagonist. You can't even really tell throughout the film that she is the protagonist. It's like she just so happens to outlive the rest of her peers. I, for one, would have preferred Annie, even though we didn't have her around for too long. I liked her bubbly personality, and she was the first girl we were introduced to, which gave off the feeling she'd be our last survivor. Oh well, we're stuck with Alice as she tries to board up the cabin to escape the killer when... Told you she'd be back. Alice has nowhere left to run when suddenly she sees car lights outside. Surely that's help. The killer can't possibly drive. It's here we're introduced to Mrs. Voorhees.
Well, I'm Mrs. Voorhees, an old friend of the Christies.
The arrival of this sweet-looking old woman lulls you into believing that Alice might finally be safe, but she slowly starts to descend while showing her resentment of the camp reopening. Informing Alice that it was her son, Jason, that had drowned back in 1957, she goes full-on crazy mode and you realize she is the killer. Now, while I do love Mrs. Voorhees, this reveal feels off. The whole movie has been framed as a whodunit, and then we find out the killer has been someone we've only just been introduced to. Hell, even Mrs. Voorhees herself, Betsy Palmer, felt that this was a weird reveal.
I said to Sean Cunningham at one point in time when we were shooting, I said, you know, you're being very unfair about this film. I said, you're not even giving anybody a loose clue that I'm in the scene.
While, yeah, it feels cheap, I love the character too much to let it ruin the movie for me. So the chase is on as Pamela hunts down Alice throughout Crystal Lake while seemingly channeling the spirit of her dead son.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her.
Ugh, she's like a reverse Norman Bates. We get a cat fight in the supply shed where Pamela forgets that superhuman strength she had dispatching the other kids and bitch slaps Alice a bit until she gets knocked back.
Oh! Oh!
This leads Alice to hiding in Ralph's favorite spot, the pantry, but Pamela locates her with ease. A quick blow to the head with a frying pan takes down Pamela. You gonna finish her off, Alice? No? Alright, that's fine. Just hang out on the beach. It's not like Pamela will come back. The final fight ends with Alice's wisest decision as she decapitates Mrs. Voorhees. Another great gag that works thanks to Savini's handiwork. Having defeated the killer, Alice paddles herself out to the lake and falls asleep until the police arrive. All is well. Sure, her friends are dead, but at least she was able to make it out alive. Oh my god, such an excellent scare. It's the ultimate jump scare that is still effective to this day. The scene goes on so long that even if you're expecting something to happen, you wait forever and come to the conclusion that you're probably wrong. Then it hits you like a brick with this freakish kid dragging Alice down, leaving you to ask, what the fuck was that? But it turns out to be a dream. An element we'll see in several more entries, but it works the best here. Alice asks if the boy is dead, but when the police officer says no boy was found, she believes he's still there. The ripples on the water leave the viewer wondering, is Jason truly alive, or was it simply her imagination? You have to remember this was supposed to be a one-off, not something that would become a full-fledged franchise, so this ambiguous ending could have worked a little better without a sequel. I still love it though. My overall thoughts on this first entry in this epic franchise. It's good. It's a slow burn that gets you excited with amazingly well-crafted deaths of characters that you're not rooting to be off, but you don't get terribly upset when it happens. There's an eerie atmosphere built around this camp that helps during some of the more tense moments. The kills are of course the most memorable things to come out of this, along with Manfredini's score and the characters of Pamela and Jason Voorhees. The final scare of Jason jumping out of the lake will forever remain to me as one of, if not the best jump scares of all time. However, I still find myself getting slightly bored while watching the teen characters dick around doing mundane things around the camp. And like I said, I love Pamela, but the reveal of her as the killer really comes out of nowhere and feels random as the entire movie is framed to make you guess which of the main characters could potentially be the killer. Surprisingly enough, this is one of the rare times where fans do not regard the first entry as being the best. I agree with this train of thought, but I still think it's a classic slasher film. It's certainly no Halloween, but it's far better than something like Sleepaway Camp. I give this 3 Mrs. Voorhees heads out of 5. But what are your thoughts? Is this your favorite in the franchise, least favorite, or somewhere in the middle? Do you like or hate how the reveal of the killer was handled? And which is your favorite kill? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll be continuing my look at the Friday the 13th franchise next week with part 2, the introduction of the one and only Jason as our main villain. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Twitter in the link below. Until next time, peace.